Hello, Sauce here. We're going to talk about the difference between categorical and numerical data. Data is information collected from an experiment or an investigation. I have an example of each. For my example of categorical data, I have a set of information. I could imagine that I asked 8 people what their favorite sport was to investigate the popularity of various sports. Notice that the response to such a question is not a number. It is the name of the sport, which we can think of each sport as being a category of response. Compare that to numerical data. I asked a different question. How many hours per week do you play basketball? And the responses, the appropriate response to such a question is in the form of a number. I have 8 numbers here, imagining that I asked 8 different people how often or how many hours a week they play basketball. Now, we often present data visually in the form of bar charts, dot plots, histograms, pie charts, and we'll be doing that in the future. But when you graph numerical data, because the responses can be so different, the difference between all of these numbers, there's only one number that is the same, it can be difficult to graph numerical data. So we often convert numerical data into categories. And when the numerical data is in categories, becomes categorical data, it's easier to present in a graph. So I'm going to show you how we can change this numerical data set and think of it as categorical data. Well, when I do that, I'm going to take a look at the numbers that I'm working with, and I'm going to choose categories for the numbers to belong in. It makes sense in the context of this question that I would have a category for the 2 responses of 0. That category would be no basketball played. And looking at the data further, I can see that some numbers are considerably lower than others. So I'm going to choose a category for the numbers 1, 2, and 3 hours of basketball played as a little bit of basketball. And my third category, the last one, is going to be for the high numbers, a lot of basketball being played. So I'm going to record that. The first thing I'm going to do is write down the categories that I chose. I chose none and little and a lot. And what I mean by belonging to the category of none is no basketball, 0 hours played. And belonging to the category of little, that is 1 to 5 hours. And to belong to the category of a lot of basketball, it would be 6 or more. So I'll say 6 plus. To finish, I'm going to place how many responses I got that belong to each category. How many responses of none? I got 2. How many responses of 1 to 5? I can count them. The 1 and the 3 and the 2 belong to that category, and that's 3 responses. And how many belong to the last category? That's the 6, 8, and 12. There are 3 responses. So I've converted the numerical data into categories, because when they're in categories, it's much easier and sometimes necessary to graph by thinking of it this way first.